So we started to talk about stack in the last class, and I showed you one example of stack. So I told you that it is a very unique data structure, um, which has the following properties, like insertion and deletion can take place at one end only, that is a top, and the element at the top of a stack is basically pointed to or basically indicated by a variable or a pointer called top. Deletion is based on last in first out policy. Naturally, since insertion and deletion can take place at the top, so the element which is inserted at the end can be deleted first, right? So last in, the element which goes in at the last is first out, is the first to go out. So I showed you an example. So we started with an empty stack and I pushed. Push is the insertion operation. So you can only push one element at a time, and pushing can be done only at the top. So initially the stack was empty, and so the top pointer was null. So it was not pointing to anything. Then I push 5. So now the stack has only one element 5, and the top pointer is pointing to pointing at 5. Then I push 4, or basically I add 4 at the top. Now top gets updated to 4, so it is now pointing to 4. So this goes on so that I push 3 and 1 respectively. So now the top at the end of this insertion, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top is 1. So the top is pointing at 1. So this is the structure of the stack. Now if you want to remove the elements, you can do it one element at a time by the pop operation. When you use the pop operation, or when you apply the pop operation, the topmost element pointed to by top will be basically deleted or eliminated, whatever you can say. So if I do pop for the first time, 1 gets popped out. So then 3, 4, 5. So first 1 goes out at the first pop, in the second pop 3 goes out, the third pop 4 goes out, and the final pop 5 goes out. So push, so you are pushing something at the top. Popping, the term popping is usually associated with, say, these popcorns, right? When you heat the popcorns, the corns get fluffy, right? And they basically jump up. So I guess the coining of the term pop operation has can be ascribed to this particular phenomenon, that it is coming out, it is jumping out, uh, the elements are jumping out. There's something called popping trees in cricket, but I don't think it is related to this pop. So I hope insertion and deletion for the stack operation, which are push and pop operations respectively, are fairly clear to you. Let's go ahead. So there is some points on the origin of stack. So stack was first referred to in the Polish notation by this person. But when it comes to implementation of stacks in programming paradigm, so I think theoretically Alan Turing used it for functions. So, but in 1945, which is earlier than Alan Turing mentioned, Konrad Zuse implemented stack in one of his computers, Z4, in 1945. So you see that this is this is close to when the Second World War was coming to an end, right? So at that time, even though the World War is coming to an end, people at different parts of the world are honing on their technological skills. So people, I mean, the superpowers all over the world are trying to build, I mean, new technologies. So, I mean, computers, I mean, people, I mean, started to believe are going to change the whole world, and the people and the countries which the most advanced computers, I mean, will have the best control over the remaining part of the world. So, I mean that basically turned out to be true, right? So, um, so that was it. And of course, I mean, Alan Turing uh, played a, I mean, significant role uh, in I mean, decoding many of the codes of the opposition, right? So he was, I mean, with the allies, I think. Yes, and his contribution is often, I mean, acknowledged. So this was about stacks. So in a function call, um, in a function in a function element, whenever you write a function, you have two different segments automatically created. One is a code segment and the other is a data segment. So you take the example of any function. So this can be a function, right? This can be a function. So whenever you write a particular function, uh, this particular code gets translated to machine readable format, right? So in machine readable format, these get translated to some operations which the machine can handle. So for example, this, I mean, summing operation, initialization, then there is a return operation. So these are translated to machine readable format. So that is the code part, I mean the code section, and there is a data section also that deals with mostly the local variables. So here we have int r as a local variable, sum as a local variable. So I mean, so the local variables are created and they're handled in the data segment. So these are, I mean, created inside, and uh, whenever there is a function call, internally a stack is maintained. So the local data in a function, I mean, which is in the purview of a function, in the scope of a function. I talked about the auto functions, right? The local functions, which sorry, the local variables which are I mean, restricted within the function are stored somewhere uh, as an element in the stack. And whenever there is a function call, uh, these, I mean, local variables are kept in a stack, and also the address to which the control should come back. So when we look at this particular program, so there is a main, right? Yeah. So there is a main. So in main, I'm calling a function. Okay. So these are the local variables of this function, a, b, and n. Right. So when I call this function, for example, you see that the control goes out of main to some to this particular function. So as I mentioned, since main is a function itself and it will have its own, I mean, local variables, and the scope is restricted within this particular function, which is in this case main, it the values of these particular functions, I mean, need to be stored somewhere, right? Otherwise they will be lost, because I am transferring the control from main, from this particular scope to a different scope. So in this case, for the first call, I'm calling binomial expansion, right? So this is a different function. So here there are, I mean, different sets of variables. So what will happen to the variables in main? Because these are not accessible in, I mean, from this binomial expansion function, right? So internally, when the control jumps from inside the program, from inside main to binomial expansion, these particular local variables are stored somewhere. And also after there is a jump from this particular point from main to binomial expansion, it comes to this function and there is some operation, right? And there is, there can be a return value, there may not be a return value. But even if there is no return value, even if there is no explicit return statement, the control has to come back to main, right? To this particular point to basically resume the operation of main, because uh, the statement which is following main has to be executed also. So the compiler must know where to come back after this returns. Return. So after this function ends, the control cannot go to this function, right? Because this function has been called by main, so it has to go back to the point where it has been called. So it has been called here, right? So it has to come back to this point. So this return address also needs to be stored somewhere. And in this particular case, the return has to come back with the value also. So this is, you see that this is a local variable inside this function, and main doesn't know about this. So what is going on? So when you return the control and also the value to main, so control comes back to this point with the value sum, right? So here implicitly the value of sum is stored somewhere. So there is, so explicitly, so I could have stored it in another local variable here, right? So instead of printing it within printf, I could have used a local variable, say sum1, and I could have written sum1 equal to binomial expansion. So sum1 is now not sum1, SOMUONE. So it is sum1, the number 1. So sum1 will now contain the value of sum, which has come from this point. So which means that, so I showed you in an example in the last class, right? So even if the names of the variables are same, they acquire different memory location. So here someone will acquire different memory location, but it will then copy the value of sum, which is returned by this particular function. So many things are happening inside, right? So we are sitting at a higher level. So we are doing a higher level programming. But if you did an assembly level programming, then you had to do all these things on your own. So that is why it is always a good idea to also learn assembly level programming. So there you had to set a particular label to this point where you want to come back. Then you had to explicitly come back to the address of main to this point. So that is actually happening inside. So this is implemented by stack. So let's take a simple example. Otherwise this is never going to be clear, I'm sure about it. So assume, so this is a very simple example just to give you an idea, basically a pictorial depiction of what's going on roughly inside. So this is not the whole picture. This is an oversimplified version of what is happening inside. So this is a main function. This is a main function. So this one. So this box represents a main function. And there is a local variable int a equal to 5. Okay. And there is a function call func1. So whenever there is a main, whenever you write a function, be it main or some other function, a code segment is created and data segment is also created. So there is a code segment which translates these instructions, and there is a data segment which contains the information about the variables which are used. Specifically the local variables. So the compiler keeps a provision for automatically. There is a provision. There is a data stack created. So this is not. So this is Okay, let's call it a data stack. Let's not complicate things too much, but it does something else also. I mean, apart from data, it stores something else. So there is a stack automatically created to keep provision for a function call. So this is actually used when there is a function call. So at this point of time, what happens? There's a function called fun1 is created and the value of this particular variable is passed. So what happens? The control goes from main. So this is one portion of code. Okay, main is written as in one portion of the memory. Uh, so it is not really memory, but it is a code segment. So it is written somewhere. And whenever there is a call, an element is pushed in the stack. So that element represents main. What do I mean by represents main? It stores the variable and its value, the local variable and its value. So what is the local variable here? A, right? In main. Also, it stores a lot of other things. Apart from that, it also stores the return address, where it should come back. When it comes back from function to where exactly at main it should come back, that is also stored. So this is one compact element that is pushed into the stack that contains information about main, with regard to where the function should come back on its return. So there is a call to this function. So this is this is another block. So corresponding to this, there is a code segment, there is a data segment. So in the data segment, what do we have? We have a local variable x which has the value of a. So keep this in mind, a and x in memory are different. Okay, in memory they are different. But in this case, x will contain the value of a, and there is another local variable w. Okay, so code segment and data segments are created for this, and suppose we have written another function 2, and the control and we call function 2 with this local variable w, which is inside function 1. So whenever this call is done, another compact element is pushed here for function 1. So this is the representation of function 1. So here we have two local variables. What are they? X and w, right? X and w, and all other details are there. So what kind of variables they are, what are the current values, and also where it should return, where the control should return on when there is a there is a return from the function to which it has by it I mean the compiler or the control has jumped. So at this point there is a call to this particular function and it does something. So it also has a local variable, right? So suppose if there was a call from function 2 again, then in that situation the compiler would have pushed something right here. Okay, so if there is a call again, then this would have been important, otherwise it is not so important. Now suppose all the operations in this particular function are done. All the operations in this particular function are done. So black color represents the forward direction of the calls and red color represents the backward direction. So in forward direction we are doing all the pushing, and in backward direction we are doing all the poppings. We are doing pop operation. So when we return from function 2, so ignore this first element. Okay, so this is for this is to ensure the provision for a function called for function 2 from function 2. So that is not important in this case because we are returning to function 1. Okay, So when we are returning to function 1, when we are returning to function 1, the address, so I mean all the information which is corresponding to function 1 should be popped off, or the information which are so we did this jump by pushing the information regarding function 1 here, right? So in popping this, we I mean we would retrieve the information for function 1. So by popping operation, so after we pop this, so we will get this information. So after returning from function 2 to function 1, we again have the I mean have x and w as a local variables. We also I mean retrieve the address where the control comes back from function to address comes back. So that is also stored. So by popping that, by popping this particular element, the compiler will be able to reinstate the particular environment we were in function 2. So the local variables x and w are retrieved, and the address is also retrieved. Also, if there is a return value from function 2 to function 1, that is also stored in some local variable here, or it can be printed also, but explicitly it is stored somewhere. Okay. And again, we have to return to main, right? So when we are returning to main, what's happening is now when we return from function to function 1, this element would have been useful. So this element then basically would have been popped. So now we are left. So when we are returning to main, we now need this information, right? So the point where the control should come back to main, and what were the data, what were the local I mean local data in main. That was I mean that data consisted of only a, right, with the values, of course. So if it I mean return some values, then there would have been some local variables in main which would have taken the values inside. So after we return to main, this basically this stack would have been empty. So when we go forward for each function call, after we do, I mean before we do the function call, we keep all the information about the current function. By information I mean the return address, local variables, and then we do the call, so that when we want to come back, we should be able to retrieve that information and return to the environment of that function from where we did the call. So this is a very important application of stack. So I gave you an example of how to keep track of the path you may traverse in a very complex network, right? So at each turn, I mean, you would have kept some markers, right? So these are those markers. So we need the most recent information first. When we're coming back from function 2, we need information of function 1 and not main, right? After we are done with function 1, when we return to main, then only we would need the variables of main or the information about main. So the calling is done in one order and the returning is done in the other order, and stack is used to implement this in a very efficient way. So this is one application of stack, but this is a very high level application. I will discuss some simple applications of stack also when I will discuss, I mean, stack as a data structure in more detail. So this was just to give you an idea of what's happening during a function call. Okay. So I talked about this modular programming, right? So in a modular programming, you try to subdivide a problem into smaller subproblems, right? So for a given function, you break that function into smaller I mean sub functions, or I mean they're functions in their own right. They're also called basically subroutines. So that helps in simplifying the problem. So uh, so in that case, a function calls some other functions. Like in main, we call, so in this example, in main, we were calling binomial this, I mean binomial expansion or power of sum, right? But there can be a special occasion where the function calls itself. So this particular application is called recursion. So it is useful in solving a large problem by solving this smaller subproblems which are basically the same problem. I mean, which is tantamount to solving the same problem but with a much smaller data. So it has two conditions. One is the terminating condition or the base condition, and the other one is the recursive or inductive condition. So I will come to this gradually. So let us try to understand this particular problem with an example. So let's take the example of finding a factorial of a large number n. So for 1, by definition, so the value of factorial is 1, right? Factorial 1 is 1. And I use a recursive definition. Sorry, there is a problem here. There is a mistake here. I will correct this. So this should be n into factorial n minus 1. N into factorial n minus 1. So this is true when n is greater than 1. So let's try to understand this with an example. So if we elaborate this, we can think factorial, we can visualize factorial like this. So factorial n is n into factorial n minus 1. So if you use this recursive definition again, so if you write factorial n minus 1, then you will get n minus 1 factorial n minus 2. So how long will it go on? Until we reach the base condition. That is, for n equal to 1, factorial the value of factorial n is 1, right? So we keep breaking the problem or reducing the problem until we reach factorial 1. So there's a mix up here, so it should be cross, but doesn't matter. So the entire product is like this: n into n minus 1 into n minus 2. It goes on until we reach, until this particular argument becomes 1, right? So then we can say that, I mean, since factorial 1 is 1, we can say that this is the end of this particular series. So let's take a smaller value of n. So we can write factorial 4 as 4 into factorial 3. Then we can write factorial 3 as 3 into factorial 2. Then we can write factorial 2 as 2 into factorial 1. And then we know that the value of factorial 1 is 1. So we can stop here. So this is basically the base condition, right? So the value of factorial will be 4 into 3 into 2 into 1, that is 24. Okay, so Okay, maybe we can look at a program of, which implements the factorial of n using recursion. So this is so I have used n. I've set n to 4, and I have called. So this is a non-recursive function, fact_n. It's a non-recursive function, so it is simple, right? So you can use a for loop. So I runs from 1 to n. So it's a product of the numbers from 1 to n. And this is a recursive function. So for the base condition, the function will this function will return 1. Otherwise, it will return n into factorial fact recursive. This same function will be called n minus 1. So what is happening exactly? So we can understand that by running this code also. So it gives the, okay, let me show, maybe I can show you the output in here. So the output is like this. So let's look at the output, and then and interchangeably let's look at the code also. So first I print call from main. So you see that there is a call from main. Then after, so we can ignore this part. So this is this is the recursive portion. So then this is called, right? So when I call fact recursive, control goes to this function, right? So what is the value of n here? N is 4. So fact recursive n is 4. N is not equal to 1, right? So the control comes to this part. So n is equal. So this statement is printed. This statement is printed. So n equals to 4 before the recursive call. Then this particular call is done. So what is done actually? N into fact recursive n minus 1 is called. So what is n minus 1? N is 4 here, right? So fact recursive n minus 1, that is fact recursive 3 is called. So the control comes back to this point. So this is called for n equal to 3. So this is false. And then for n equal to 3, this line is called. N equal to 3 before recursive call, and then control comes to this point. So this is called again for n equal to, so n is 3 here, right? So n equal to 2. So for n equal to 3, this is printed. So the control comes, so this function is called again, the same function is called again for n equal to 2. So this condition is not true again. So this line is printed. N equal to 2 before recursive call. Then this function is called for n equal to what? N minus 1, that is 1, right? So the function is called for n equal to 1. So at this point, this condition becomes true. So base condition is printed for n equal to 1, right? So now we have reached a stage where we are ready to return from the base condition to the previous calls. So remember, n equal to 1 was called when n was 2, right? When n was 2, I made this call. So n was 2, so I calculate what? N into fact recursive n minus 1, that is 1. So here 1 is returned. So at this point we get the value of 1. So n was 2 and n into 1 is how much? 2. So then this line is printed. After returning from call, n is 2. N is 2. And the current value of factorial is how much? This x. X is what? N is 2 here, right? 2 into factorial of 1, that is 1. So current value, so this is the stage where we are calculating factorial 2. The value of factorial 2 is how much? 2. Then there is a return. So where does the control return? It returned to the point when it was from where it was called, right? Where it was called? It was called when n was equal to how much? 3. Right. So at that stage, n was 3. So it returned to a previous call where n was 3 and fact recursive, this value is returned, right? So this value is 2. So I'm coming back, I'm returning from factorial 2. So fact n minus 1, n is 3, right? So factorial 2, we know that value, right? So that value is getting returned. That is 2. 3 into 2 we are getting from this line. So we are now at n equal to 3, right? So after returning from call, this is printed and current value is factorial of what? Is what? 6. That is 2 is returned from factorial 2 and the current value of n is 3. So 3 into 2 is 6. Then, so current value of factorial is 6. What is that? Factorial 3, right? So then there is another return. What is it returning? 6, right? This since we have calculated 6 here. To what point is it returning? It is returning to n equal to 4, right? It was called when n was 4. So 4 into factorial 3 is a value which has returned from the previous call. So we have already printed 6 where n was 3. Now this line is printed after returning from call, it should be RE. After returning from this call, n is currently 4 because it has come back, right, from n equal to 3. So we know the value of n equal to 3, value of this for n equal to 3, that is 6. N is 4, 6 into 4, 24. So the current value of factorial is 4, that is factorial 4. And then you see that the recursion portion is done because the recursion was called for n equal to 4. Who called it? The main called it, right? The control now comes back to this point. So fact recursive is now how much? 24, right? We have printed it. So this value gets stored to this variable. This is a local variable. Then this line is printed, return to mail, and I have printed this, recursive value as 24. Okay. So I'm sure that the whole process won't be clear until I show you this. So what is happening? This is we were in main, and we called f equal to fact4. So imagine that the name of the function is fact. Okay, fact does what? Fact is nothing but this function. It is this function, fact recursive, same function. So I'm calling fact4 from main. So the control comes to factorial function. So this is the factorial function and the call is for 4. So in X, what I am doing 4 into factorial 3, but I don't know the factorial 3 yet. For that, I am calling fact again, but for n equal to 3. So the control is coming to the same function, but for a different variable. That is 3. In fact 3, I am doing this 3 into fact 2. So I don't know the value of fact 2 here. So I'm doing this call once again. Fact 2, right? So here I'm calculating this 2 into fact 1. I don't know the value of fact 1 yet. So now I'm calling fact again for 1. Here I know its value. That is return 1. So at this point 1 is getting returned. So what is 1? 1 is value of fact 1, right? Because I called fact 1 to know the value of fact 1. So that is 1. So in fact 1, this gets replaced. Fact 1 gets replaced by 1. So that the value of x becomes what? 2, right? 2 into 1, 2. 2 into 1, 2. So this is getting returned to this point. That is fact 2. So now I know the value of fact 2, right? So this is fact 2. Fact is 2. So this is fact 2. 3 into 2. 3 into fact 2 is 6, right? So the control, so this value 6 goes back to this point, because this is the value of fact 3, right? So I want the value of fact 3, which I have got, that is 6. 4 into fact 3, that is what, 6. So now I have x as 4 into 6, that is 24. That is the value of factorial 4. Now it has to return to where this fact 4 was called, that was main. So it is coming, so this value returns to main. So remember, so here if we go back to what is happening inside, if we look at this particular picture, I talked about whenever there is a function called, there is a push in stack with the values of the current variable, so with the current values of the local variables for that function. So here the functions were different, right? Main, func1 and func2. Here, when, so ignore this part, so think about these two functions. So here the functions are func1 and func2, but in our example the functions are same, right? But they are not really same. They are two different instances of the same function. So for each call we will have different copies of the local variables. So what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? So in main I had some local variables, say 4 is stored somewhere. So when I come from main to this point, that value is stored somewhere. So here this value of n is passed, right? So here, so this is called for fact 4. So suppose this is the, so this is the value of n. So we are calculating factorial n. So this is the current value of n, right? And also there is an x. So this is x specific to fact 4. So the x for fact 3 will be different. X for fact 2 will be different, right? And the values of n are also different. So this is the call of fact for n is equal to 4, right? This is the call of fact for n is equal to 3. This is the fact for n is equal to 2. This is the fact for n is equal to 1. So this is the whole forward process and this is the whole backward process, right? If you have not done recursion before, this can be baffling. So if you have done recursion before, then there is no point in asking you, because you already know it. If you have not done anything using recursion, this is the point you should understand, you should bear in your mind. Okay, try to understand this. I will send you the codes, the code, of course, and slides, I mean, later on. So this is the pictorial representation of what is happening inside, and this is the theoretical explanation of what is happening. So you have done induction, right? Proof by induction you have done, right? Every one of you, do you know what induction is? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So it is nothing but induction. So the base condition, so you prove, so suppose you want to show that n plus 1 square is equal to n square plus 2ab plus b square, something like that. So you want to show that this happens for all n. Okay, so what do? You start with a base condition, right? So for n equal to 1 you show it, or maybe for n equal to 2 you show it. Then you assume that it happens for n equals to m. Then you want to show it for n equal to m plus 1, and you show that it it holds for m plus 1 also, right? That is the thought process. Here it is not exactly the same, but it is also called inductive reasoning, where when the value of n is small, it is easy to calculate, so you don't bother about all these jumpings and all these complications, right? So you can easily calculate that. But when n becomes large, then uh, you can take the help of this kind of process. So you can also do this using this loop, right? You can also do this using this loop. So why are you doing it in this particular fashion? So this gives you the idea of decomposition and recomposition. So you are decomposing the problem. Sorry, you are decomposing the problem to smaller sub problems, to a smaller version of the same problem, to an extent that it becomes manageable. So this is so here is a point. This is, we have reached a trivial point, right? A point of triviality. And from this point, the problem is simple enough for you to solve it manually. Okay, because you know the answer of this. Then you are transferring that knowledge to a slightly different version. That's what we do, right? I mean, how do we, I mean, start any learning? We start with simple instances, right? When we start to learn addition, we first add two very simple numbers, right? Then we gradually graduate to a level of skill where you are capable of solving much more complex problems. So that is the situation here. So here the problem decomposition step is this one, where the problem is decomposed into smaller version of the same problem, and this is the step of recomposition, where from the smaller version of that problem you are basically recomposing that for higher values of n. And this helps one to solve much more complicated problems, and it is also part of inductive reasoning. So I mentioned in the first or second class that coding is not writing a few instructions to the program. It is also about representing the problem in an efficient way. So this is thought to be one efficient way of representing the problem. Okay, so this was some introduction to recursion. We can do some more problems together, but you try to understand the basic notion of recursion. This is the way it is. So maybe you can continue in the next class.